I'm Joeita, and this is The Pulse. What is blindness? Sounds like a pretty obvious question, but if you were to ask a doctor or even a layperson on the street, more often than not, what you'll probably get from them is that blindness is not being able to see. It's a lack of vision, a loss of some kind. And if there were more to it, to the question of what blindness actually is, it isn't apparent. For most blind people, blindness is something that they have lived with for years, and for many will continue to do so for years to come. And even if someone weren't blind, they still have their opinions about blindness. You are so brave. How do you cross the street as a blind person? Who picks out your clothes if you can't see? And on and on. Today, we discuss the perceptions of blindness. It's time to put your finger on the pulse. Hello and welcome to The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm Joeita, and I'm excited to talk to you about this really broad topic, perceptions of blindness, and I've had other shows about this in the past. I know when we had Leona Gordian on the show talking about their plant eyes, that was, I want to say maybe not even last year, but maybe a year and a half ago. That show got a lot of traction. A lot of people enjoyed listening to it. So I hope you enjoy this further exploration as to, what blindness actually is and how it's perceived in the world around us and how it is in a dialogue with sight. Before we go any further, I have been asked by my husband to remind everyone not to forget to like and subscribe. And if you have comments about the show or if you have topics you'd like to hear an expert on, please leave it down in the comment section below. So there you go. That's out of the way. I'm very pleased to welcome a terrific guest who is as enthusiastic to be on the show as I am to have her on the program. Devon Healey is an assistant professor of disability studies at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. My goodness, I am tripping over my tongue today. At the University of Toronto. She is the author of Dramatizing Blindness, Disability Studies as Critical Creative Narrative, which came out in 2021. So I'm sad that I missed the boat and didn't have Devon on in 2021, but too little, too late. Devon is also an award-winning actor and the co-founder of Peripheral Theater. So wears many hats. Devon Healey, thank you very much for being on the program. I'm really glad you could join us.
Joeita, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here today.
I know this is a really broad area of exploration, but when you say that your research primarily deals with the perception of blindness, what exactly are you talking about?
What I'm really intrigued with, and you kind of began this in your intro when you said there's so many conceptions of blindness, and typically those conceptions understand blindness as a lack of sight, as a distortion to the world, the sighted world. And that's one way of perceiving blindness. It's probably one of the dominant ways in which we understand blindness. I find it interesting that you can ask anyone, what do you think blindness is? And everyone has some sort of conception or story or feeling about it. And it's typically, you close your eyes and you think that's what blindness is. Nothing. And before blindness became part of my life, I must admit that I too fell into that perception of blindness as darkness, as not seeing. But as I began to move into the beauty, into the mystery of blindness, I was really surprised to see that blindness was far more than what I had initially imagined or thought blindness to be. And so that surprise began my work into exploring blindness not as a lack or a loss, but rather as a way of moving in the world, as a way of perceiving the world. I began to feel my body differently as I began to move through within blindness. and I began to notice different things. And so for me, that kind of noticing and slowing down a little bit and realizing, hang on, blindness isn't what I thought it was going to be, and allowed myself to listen, to feel blindness, I began to realize that there is this gorgeous perception. There's this connection to the world that is completely other, that is completely nuanced and complex, far beyond what sighted eyes have imagined blindness to be. And what intrigues me, what kind of animates now my life and my work, is how to make the perceptions of blindness, the feel that blindness gives me in my body, how I move through the world, how can I share that with blind people, other blind people, and also with sighted people, trying to really disturb the very powerful imaginary that kind of has held eyes to perceive one way. I think blindness is one of the most intriguing and mysterious movements in our world. And I feel really lucky to be able to be a part of that movement.
I read somewhere years ago that according to the research, 80% of what we perceive is through sight. And so if someone is quote unquote blind, and if the dominant assertion is that, blindness is a lack of vision, do you think that your research and your thinking into what blindness is and how you move through the world as a blind person may in fact help you interrogate sight and what it means to be sighted in the world?
Oh, Joeita, absolutely. I think something that I've began to explore, in particular through my life in blindness, is that sight isn't necessarily as much of a given as maybe medicine or interpretations of the body, so through biology or something like that, would have us believe. I do find that sight is very much, so sightedness is very much constructed and quite social. It's almost sightedness is a culture, and it's a culture that we do together. And it comes alive through interaction. So I'm even thinking here of, sighted people on the street. They're not just sighted. They have to, in some ways, do it. They show each other that they can see. So someone might wave to someone on the street, and then another person waves back. And there they are. They're doing sightedness. They're doing that culture of vision. And the intriguing thing about sighted eyes, sighted people, is that oftentimes they don't understand their vision, or they don't question their eyes as something that they have to do, as something deeply social. And blindness, I find, is a keen observer of sight. Blind people know sight so well. We know the norms, the customs, the traditions, the beliefs of the sighted world, of sighted culture. And blindness, I think, has a lot to say and a lot to teach sighted people about sight. And through that keen observation, there's also the perceptions of blindness that sometimes go unnoticed or unexplored. And for me, that's really where my work is moving. That if we understand sightedness as a culture, as a doing, as extremely social, so too is blindness as a doing, and is a culture that we make together. And I just think that's fascinating.
It is.
And really exciting.
Yeah, and what kind of gets me thinking about the relationship between blindness and sight is the fact that many blind people are encouraged very actively to perform sightedness. But if they can pass as sighted, all the better, in air quotes. But other things as well, even if you're completely blind, telling small children, try to make eye contact. Even if you can't make eye contact, look in the direction of the person who's talking to you, so that you try to simulate eye contact with a sighted person. Do you think that it's worthwhile still to explore the ways in which blind people are encouraged to simulate sight, or is it one of those things that's been talked about ad nauseum because we have doctors and passels of rehab specialists all trying to get blind people to simulate sighted behavior? You can do everything a sighted person can do, except you'll do it differently, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think absolutely we need to slow down a little bit. And as you say, really pay attention to what it is we're doing when we're doing sightedness as blind people. And to that, just to start, I always find it intriguing that sometimes, so I am a professor at the University of Toronto, and sometimes when I'll go into class or I'll move throughout the halls, people will come up to me and say, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea you were blind." And it's said in such a way that I'm not quite too sure how to interpret that. I wonder, is it to be read as a compliment? And if it is, what is that telling us about the cultures within which we move collectively? That's telling us a little bit about how sightedness imagines blindness as something that you should not look into, or that you should not be. And we kind of choreograph the world through sightedness, and you said it there in terms of making eye contact, or even now when I'm talking to you, Joeita, I'm moving my hands towards the camera. I'm doing sightedness. I'm performing sightedness. And I think that attending to the ways in which we choreograph, we do sightedness, allows us to expand and disturb a little bit the very powerful ways in which we interpret our bodies through medicine. Medicine kind of creeps into our social ways of being together. And I think we really need to slow down and attend to that. And so for me, the ways in which blindness notices this choreography of sightedness and can participate in it opens up room for us to critique sighted culture, what we do with and to each other through sight. And in that allows us to explore blindness. I remember I was on a television show a couple of years ago. I was cast as a teacher at a school for the blind. And this show in particular was about vampires. And so I was in this school, and the initial call for the audition asked for blind performers. So I thought, this is great. I got a message from my agent saying, funnily enough, "Is this you?" Even though she knew I was blind. So even in that question, "Is this you?" they're calling for blind performers, suggests how we might not fully understand or feel blindness and sightedness in particular ways. But I did. I responded and said, "Yep, it's me." So I went for the audition, landed it. And when I showed up on set, there were 25 young actors playing the blind students. And what I found very intriguing was that none of them were blind.
Oh, yeah. But not surprising,
So
sorry to say.
Not surprising. So there was a sighted blindness consultant on set who was there to teach everyone how to be blind. So this is the really intriguing part. As I spent more and more time on set, I began to realize that no one knew that I was blind. Everything was within this kind of sighted performance, this culture choreography of silent hand gestures of where to move. My contract was printed out in very, very tiny font. And so I thought, now I am in a really exciting spot. There's the performer in me that is, thrilled to be on a television show and okay. And then there's the blind observer in me that thinks, now here I am in a really intriguing position. I get to watch and notice sight, teaching sight what blindness is. And so as I moved, the sighted blindness consultant yelled cut and said, Devon, no. a blind person would never move that way. And she proceeded to then move my body and choreograph what sighted eyes believe blindness is. And for me, that moment showed how deeply social our understandings of sightedness and blindness is, and how we get caught up in doing that. We get caught up in performing in some ways, even on the street, blindness and sight. And this is where I think my work kind of finds the roles, if you will, of blindness and sight on the stage of everyday life, moving down the street, having a coffee in a cafe, being in a classroom, at home. There are these beautiful, rich moments where we can pay attention and notice the ways in which we do certain expressions of our lives that we think are just there or not there. And that's exciting.
It is really exciting. I was also curious about how you come to, I mean, you can hear in your voice how excited and how much you love being a performer. Did you discover theater and acting before or after you lost your vision?
I was always a performer before blindness made itself noticeable to me.
See what I did there?
So theater was always a part of my life that I loved. I went to school for theater. And then as blindness became more and more a part of me and how I moved through the world and how the world came to me, my relationship with theater became really troubled. I couldn't perform, not even getting to the roles that I hoped to get. I couldn't perform sight. I couldn't perform sighted person in the way that I needed to in order to get through the door to even be considered for a role at that time. And this is probably about 15 years ago. Blindness, saying that you were blind, really shocked people. And I felt and interpreted in these moments, it scared people. And it scared people so much that they couldn't imagine how I could then be a performer. So that really shifted my relationship for quite some time. And I went and got a master's at the University of Toronto, exploring the performance of sightedness and blindness. And the more I engaged with that academically, I realized that theater was the perfect way in which to share my work. And so the book that you mentioned, Dramatizing Blindness, is written as a play. It's 5 acts, and it follows the journey of the main character, Erin, semi-autobiographical, as she's discovering blindness within her, and all the very dramatic ways that happens in life on, as I say, on the streets, getting a coffee, in the chair of ophthalmology. I mean, I don't know if there's anything more dramatic than those moments that many of us have gone through.
You describe it as a throne.
A throne,
which I thought was
yes.
quite amusing.
Yeah, the throne of ophthalmology, and we sit there and we are viewed and told how to relate to our eyes, told essentially how to be. And so for me, theater and drama, a perfect way to explore that. And really, it was then through blindness that my love of theater was rekindled. And now, actually, I'm writing a play with Outside the March. It's a Toronto theater company about exploring blindness as perception. It's called Rainbow on Mars.
Oh, and tell us more about that.
I'd love to. Yeah. So one of the ways that I've also been experiencing blindness within theater, and particularly visual arts, is that questions of accessibility nearly always flow in one direction. And that's how to make a sighted experience, we'll use ballet or theater, how to make the visual feast that is the performance accessible to blind people. And that's great through audio description. And that's certainly one way of engaging with theater, with arts. But that approach tends to ignore the perceptions of blindness, the presence of blindness that already exists on stage, that's already in the room. And so with my work now through theater and Rainbow on Mars, I'm trying to flip that flow a little bit, asking how can I make the perceptions of blindness, how can I make the feel of blindness, the artistry of blindness accessible to blind and sighted people together. And so what I'm developing is something called immersive descriptive audio. And it begins right at the start of the creative process. So I don't understand audio description as something to be layered on at the end, but as integral to the writing of the script and play. And to really explore how it is we experience the world. So the descriptive audio includes music, sound, description of the body, but also as a narrative force as well. So part of the storytelling. And it also tries to get at the inside emotion and feel that the performers have as well in terms of their body and movements. So it really, it's a immersive descriptive audio tries to disturb the isolation of the senses, so just seeing or hearing, tries to mix and commingle them a little bit to have a new experience, and an experience that's grounded in blindness. And so all audience members, however you understand yourself in terms of blindness or sightedness, or somewhere in between, or maybe not quite, even within those two realms, you experience the show together. So there's also no isolation in terms of headsets for particular people. And we play with sight a little bit too. So not everything that happens on stage is described, and not everything that's described is happening in the way it is on stage. So that's what I'm working on. That'll be premiering August 2025 in Toronto.
It sounds a lot like a radio play. I mean, as you were describing it to me, I was thinking a lot about radio plays, which they don't make anymore, I feel. But, I would say like when I was a kid, so maybe, when I was 20 years ago, or maybe even before that, radio plays were quite ubiquitous because it was a way for people to be entertained. But I mean, no one could see the actors. So there was a way in which radio plays were written so that people really lent into describing as part of the narrative experience more than they would in a conventional play that people saw in a theater. Do you draw some inspiration from radio plays, just out of curiosity?
Absolutely. I think that's that kind of expression and engagement with language that a radio play offers is the foundation of how it is I imagine Rainbow on Mars and immersive descriptive audio to be. But then what really comes in and adds this sensory nuance to it is we've partnered with the National Ballet of Canada. And so their apprentice dancers will be part of the show as well, taking on the mood and feel of blindness on stage. So also through their body and dance, expressing blindness. And so that also deeply changes the language, what it is. The descriptive audio is engaging. So a lot in terms of the feel of the dancers, how their muscles are working, their breath, how they at times are portraying in an abstract way what is being described quite literally. I'll give you an example. There's a moment where the main character of Erin, she's laying down by water in a forest, and she's exploring her blindness for the first time, exploring how it looks to her, because of course she can't touch it. And around her, the dancers make up the water, the forest. They help her discover blindness. Now, the intriguing thing is the descriptive audio, what's being said, is what I really wish we could do, be in a forest and have that. So in some ways, if you understand your eyes as and your perception of the world through blindness, you're getting what I had imagined. The dancers then are there doing that in an abstract way. So also some of that description is layered in. And so seeing is maybe not believing, and listening maybe does direct you to kind of feel what you see in a different way. Also the direction of sound, where sound's coming from, the vibrational pull, the mood in terms of lighting. Lighting gets worked in as well into the description. So you're right that the radio play, in terms of just the love of language and description, is there, but then blindness comes in and just completely opens up the vocabulary and also the body. I think blindness puts us in touch with our body in such a magical way. And so immersive descriptive audio is trying to get at a bit of that magic. But of course, we'll never be able to fully do that. So that's why hopefully there'll be many shows.
I don't mean to be contrary, and I am looking at the clock and I realize it's just, we have a couple of minutes left, but I have to ask you, a couple of times in our conversation, you mentioned the mood and the feel of blindness. And yet, no two blind people experience blindness in quite the same way. I had someone, I had a fashion designer on a couple months back, and she wanted people to workshop what different colors meant to them, and so each of her participants made different associations with the color blue, and it evoked different feelings and emotions and experiences. When one is engaged in the practice of immersive descriptive audio, how does one distinguish between an individual choreographer's interpretation of blindness and not convey a sense that this is sort of a universal experience of blindness? Because I think it's fair to say that two blind people don't necessarily see things the same way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And I think that's one of the magical things about blindness. That's one of the very dynamic features of being blind, is that it tends to be a very personal experience. Now, we could approach that and say, and so all blindness is an individualistic experience. And that's absolutely one way of doing it. And one thing that I think is intriguing about the many expressions of blindness is that we don't necessarily move in the world in the way that sight directs. And so that feel of blindness, and that's why a lot of my engagement of blindness is grounded in the body and how it shifts the relation that we have with our body and the world. I mean, picking up a glass when you're blind is never just picking up a glass. You have an intense, deep relationship to, at first, where the glass is, where you set it. When your hand touches it, you feel the glass in a different way. It comes to your lips. You feel that. Walking down the streets, in whatever way blindness comes to you, is never just walking down the streets.
Oh gosh, no.
Right? Like it's.
I wish it were just walking down the street, but I'm afraid not.
Of course, Joeita. And there are those moments, and you're right. And I don't mean to say blindness is this only fantastic thing. I mean, that's also what I find intriguing, is that blindness can be very difficult. Blindness is scary. Blindness can be, blindness can be very frustrating and upsetting. And that's also what I want to share too. It's that sometimes as engagements with blindness happen, either we rest in these extremes of being overly positive, look what I can do, or, oh, this is so upsetting. And what I try to capture is the kind of kaleidoscopic.
Yes, that's a great word, because I was going to say that, there's a degree of neutrality, is that no one ever associates blindness with neutrality. More often than not, it's this massive tragedy that you have to, you're so brave, how did you cross the street, yada, yada, yada. But, I like the word kaleidoscopic because it just shows the richness and diversity of experience. Devon, I'm really sad to say that our time is up.
Are we? We are at our end. Joey, it's been such a pleasure. And if I can end by just saying one thing, and what I find kind of fun about saying kaleidoscopic is that initially we think of a kaleidoscope with just colors and vision, a very visual activity. But I wonder if we might begin to understand how we feel that kaleidoscope with our body. So colors are not just colors, but maybe they're something that we explore within our bodies. So that's just, it's been such a pleasure, Joeita. Thank you so much.
It was great having you on the show. And it's one of those regrettable things where I'm looking at the clock and going, no, come on, turn back time. I want to keep talking.
You got Cher in your mind. If I could turn back time.
Yes, absolutely. I hope you'll come back a little bit closer to the debut of Rainbow on Mars, or if you do anything else, write another book in the meanwhile. We would love to have you back on the program. Thanks so much, Devon. It was a pleasure.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
There goes Devon Healey, who is an award-winning actor, performer, and the writer, as well as an assistant professor at OISE, the Ontario Institute for Studies and Education at U of T. Really fascinating person. I hope you'll check out Rainbow on Mars when it lands in Toronto in probably now a year's time. I hope I remember. It'll be great to check that out, but also you can check out Devon's page on U of T's website, where you have some links to Devon's ongoing research and writing. Always interested to make available to everybody some of the great writing and research that is taking place on blindness and in the area of blindness studies. Well, that's all the time I have for today. As I said off the top of the program, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and leave your comments down below. You're also welcome to write us an email, write to feedback@ami.ca with any comments or questions, or you can give us a call at 1-866-509-4545. That's 1-866-509-4545. Don't forget to leave permission to play the audio on the program. You guys don't send enough voicemail, so I hope you will take a couple minutes to do that. You can also find us on X, formerly Twitter, @AMI Audio. Use the hashtag PulseAMI to let us know that the tweet is intended for the show, or you can find me on X @Joeita Gupta. It has been really delightful being with you today, and I hope you will tune in for future conversations on disability studies and on blindness studies. I've been your host, Joeita Gupta. Thanks so much for listening. The technical producer of the show is Mark DeFlalo. Ryan Delahanty is the coordinator for AMI Audio Podcasts, and Andy Frank is the manager of AMI Audio. Enjoy the rest of your day.